My name is Beverly, and I'm 38 years old. Standing on this university stage, watching my family's faces shift from smug smiles to shocked silence gives me a satisfaction I never imagined. For years, they called me Nerd Bookworm useless. Now, as the announced keynote speaker at my brother's graduation, I see recognition dawning in their eyes. The family who mocked my studying now sits speechless in the front row. Before I tell you how we got here, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you most. I grew up in a modest two-story colonial in the suburbs of Boston, where achievement was measured in dollars and social connections, not academic success. My father, Gerald, worked as a sales executive for a pharmaceutical company, and my mother, Doris, managed client accounts at an advertising agency. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family, but within our walls existed a hierarchy that placed me firmly at the bottom. My younger brother, Harold, was the golden child from the moment he was born. 3 years my junior, he possessed the natural charisma and athletic ability my parents valued. Every weekend revolved around his baseball games, hockey practices, or swimming meets. My parents invested thousands in private coaching, the best equipment, and travel teams. Meanwhile, I developed a passion for books and learning that was met with eye rolls and dismissive comments. "Beverly's buried in another book," my father would announce at dinner parties, as if describing a bizarre habit. "We're hoping she'll grow out of it and develop some real-world skills." The first time I brought home straight A's in 4th grade, proudly displaying my report card, my mother glanced at it and said, "That's nice, honey, but grades don't teach you how to talk to people." Then she immediately turned to Harold and gushed over his C+ in math, because he had shown improvement. By middle school, I had learned to keep my academic achievements to myself. When I won the regional spelling bee in 7th grade, I didn't even mention it at home. What was the point? The previous year, I had excitedly told them about placing second in the science fair, and my father had responded, "Reading books and memorizing facts isn't going to get you anywhere in life, Beverly. Look at me. I barely passed college and I make 6 figures." Our house had a finished basement that became Harold's trophy shrine. Shelves lined with participation trophies, medals, and team photos documented his every athletic endeavor regardless of actual success. My academic certificates and medals stayed in a shoebox under my bed. High school only widened the divide. While Harold became captain of the baseball team and was elected homecoming king, I found sanctuary in advanced placement classes and the school library. The librarian, Mrs. Wallace, became more supportive of my academic interests than my own parents ever were. She would save new books she thought I'd enjoy and recommend college programs that matched my interests. "You have a beautiful mind, Beverly," she told me once. "Don't let anyone convince you that's not valuable." When I was named valedictorian of my high school class, my parents attended the ceremony only because it would have looked bad to neighbors if they hadn't. They sat stone-faced during my speech, and my father's only comment afterward was, "You could have mentioned your brother's baseball scholarship." The fact that I had received academic scholarship offers from 7 prestigious universities apparently wasn't worth acknowledging. The worst memory came during my junior year when I won first place in the state science competition. My project on economic models for sustainable energy had earned me not only the top prize, but also an invitation to the national competition in Chicago. I needed a parent to sign the permission form and help with travel arrangements. "We can't take time off work for that," my mother said without looking up from her magazine. "And we can't afford the hotel." "The school will cover the hotel," I explained. "And it's just a signature on the form," my father scoffed. "Beverly, this science stuff is just a hobby. Harold has an important baseball tournament that weekend anyway." I ended up forging my mother's signature and asking Mrs. Wallace to act as my chaperone. I won 3rd place nationally, and when I returned home, my parents hadn't even noticed I was gone. By senior year, I knew I would have to navigate college applications alone. My parents refused to fill out financial aid forms, claiming they didn't want to share their personal information. The truth was, They didn't want to contribute anything toward my education. Mrs. Wallace helped me apply for independent student status, and I spent countless nights researching scholarships and grants. College is a waste of money unless you're studying business or medicine, my father declared when I received my acceptance letters. You'll end up with debt and no job prospects. My mother was slightly more diplomatic, but equally discouraging. Sweetie, you're smart, but book smarts don't pay bills. Maybe consider a 2-year program in something practical. The night before I left for college, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. At least we won't have to worry about Beverly making something of herself anymore, my mother said. She's made her choice. My father laughed. 4 years of reading books on our dime. Well, scholarship dime. Harold's the one who'll support us in our old age. I stood in the hallway, tears streaming down my face as the reality fully sank in. My own parents had already written me off as a failure before I'd even begun. I arrived at Princeton University with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. My parents had declined to drive me, claiming they needed to take Harold shopping for his senior year of high school. I took a bus and then a train, navigating the final stretch to campus by myself. My scholarship covered tuition and partial room and board, but I still needed to work to cover the rest of my living expenses. Within the first week, I had secured a job at the university library and another at a coffee shop off campus. Between classes, studying and working 20 hours a week, I barely had time to process the loneliness. My roommate Donna came from a wealthy family in Connecticut. Her parents called every day, sent care packages weekly, and had fully furnished our shared dorm room with matching bedding, sets, a mini fridge, and a microwave. My side remained Spartan, just the essentials I could afford. "Don't your parents want to know how you're settling in?" Donna asked after a month, noticing I never received calls or packages. "They're busy with my brother." I said, the excuse so familiar, it felt rehearsed. The first semester was brutal. While other freshmen were making friends and adjusting to college life, I was exhausted from juggling work and academics. I lost weight, developed insomnia, and questioned whether I should have listened to my parents after all. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Everything changed in my second semester when I took Introduction to Economics with Professor Karen Miller. Unlike my previous professors, who lectured to large halls without much personal interaction, Professor Miller noticed me. After I earned the highest grade on the midterm exam, she asked me to stay after class. "You have a remarkable mind for economic theory," she said. "Are you considering it as your major?" I nodded, surprised by her interest. I've always been fascinated by how economic systems shape society. "Well, I'd like to see what else that mind of yours can do. Would you be interested in being my research assistant next year? It's a paid position." That conversation changed the trajectory of my college experience. Working with Professor Miller not only eased my financial burden, but gave me a mentor who believed in my potential. She invited me to academic conferences, introduced me to her colleagues, and pushed me to publish my first research paper as a junior. Through Professor Miller, I met Linda, another economics student who became my closest friend. Linda's family was like something from a movie. Supportive parents who were professors themselves, siblings who celebrated each other's achievements, Sunday dinners filled with intellectual debate and laughter. The first time Linda invited me home for Thanksgiving, I nearly cried at the dinner table when her father asked detailed questions about my research and actually listened to my answers. Her mother had read my published paper and praised specific points. It was the first time I'd experienced what it felt like to have family take genuine interest in my work. Meanwhile, my own family became increasingly distant. My mother called occasionally, but our conversations were superficial. She never asked about my classes or accomplishments, focusing instead on neighborhood gossip or Harold's latest achievements. My father rarely came to the phone at all. Harold started college on a baseball scholarship at a state university where he majored in business administration. His academic performance was mediocre, but my parents spoke about him as if he were a prodigy. When he called me, it was usually to ask for help with an assignment or to borrow money. "Come on, Bev," he'd say when I hesitated to send cash. "You've got that fancy scholarship. I know you have extra." I didn't have extra. Every dollar was carefully budgeted, but the desire for any kind of familial connection made me give in more often than I should have. By my senior year, I had distinguished myself as one of the top economics students in the country. I was published in 2 academic journals, had presented at 3 conferences, and received offers from several prestigious graduate programs. Professor Miller threw a small celebration when I was accepted to Harvard for my PhD, with full funding. "You should be incredibly proud," she told me. "I've never had a student accomplish so much so quickly." I invited my parents to my graduation ceremony. I was graduating summa cum laude and had been selected to give a speech as the top student in the economics department. For weeks I heard nothing. Finally, 3 days before the ceremony, my mother called. "We won't be able to make it, sweetie. Your father has an important golf tournament, and Harold has his final baseball game of the season. You understand, right? It's not like this is your real graduation anyway. You're going to be in school forever with that PhD program." I sat in my apartment after the call, staring at the wall. Linda found me there hours later when she came to help me prepare for graduation. "They're not coming," I said flatly. Linda sat beside me, putting her arm around my shoulders. "Then we'll be your family tomorrow. My parents are coming, Professor Miller will be there, and all your friends, the people who see you." She was right. At graduation, I looked out at the crowd and saw rows of people who had supported and believed in me. It didn't fully heal the wound of my parents' absence, but it showed me that I had built a new kind of family, one based on mutual respect and genuine care. That summer, before moving to Cambridge for my PhD program, I reduced contact with my biological family to holiday phone calls and occasional emails. It was easier that way. Whenever we spoke, I left the conversations feeling diminished and doubting myself. With physical and emotional distance, I could finally start to believe in my own worth without their constant undermining. "Family is who treats you like family," Linda told me as she helped me pack for Harvard, "not who happens to share your DNA." It was a lesson I carried with me as I began the next chapter of my academic journey, determined to define myself on my own terms. The years of my doctoral program flew by in a whirlwind of research, teaching, and writing. I specialized in behavioral economics with a focus on decision-making during financial crises. My dissertation examined how family dynamics influence economic choices, perhaps a subconscious exploration of my own background. It received the department's highest honors and led to multiple job offers before I even defended it. I accepted a position as an assistant professor at Stanford University, drawn to their innovative economics department and the California sunshine. At 30 years old, I had achieved what many academics spend their entire careers working toward. My research was cited in major publications, I was invited to speak at international conferences, and my classes always had waiting lists of eager students. My apartment in Palo Alto was small but beautiful, with shelves lined with books and large windows that flooded the rooms with light. For the first time in my life, I felt truly established and secure. I had created a home and a career entirely on my own terms. Contact with my family had dwindled to Christmas cards and the occasional brief email. I sent gifts for birthdays and holidays that were rarely acknowledged. From social media and infrequent updates from distant relatives, I gathered that Harold had graduated and was working for my father's company, which had expanded into real estate development. They appeared to be doing well, posting photos of vacations and new cars. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday in April, my phone rang with my mother's number. I almost didn't answer. We hadn't spoken in nearly 8 months. "Beverly, it's Mom." Her voice sounded strained, almost tearful, something I'd rarely heard. "Is everything okay?" I asked, immediately concerned despite our distance. "Not really, no." She took a deep breath. "Your father's company is in trouble. Bad investments and the market crash hit us hard. We might lose the house." What followed was a detailed account of how my father had made a series of risky investments, leveraging their home and retirement accounts. When the housing market collapsed, they found themselves underwater on multiple properties and facing bankruptcy. We didn't want to bother you, she said, though this was the first time they'd ever worried about bothering me. But we're desperate, Beverly. Harold's trying to help, but his salary isn't enough. We remembered you're doing well at that university. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Concern for their well-being, validation that they finally recognized my success, and wariness about their sudden interest in my life. How much do you need? I asked, already mentally calculating what I could afford. 80,000 would get us current on the mortgage and pay off the worst of the creditors, she said, as if asking for $80. The sum was substantial, most of my savings, but I had it. Years of living frugally and investing wisely had built a solid financial cushion. I'll need to think about it, I said. Can I call you tomorrow? My mother's voice turned cold. I thought you'd want to help your family immediately. We're facing eviction, Beverly. That manipulation tactic was familiar from childhood, making me feel selfish for having boundaries. In the past, it would have worked instantly. Now I recognized it, but still felt the pull. After consulting with a financial advisor and Linda, who cautioned me to get everything in writing, I agreed to help. I transferred $50,000 to my parents with a simple legal agreement stating it was a loan to be repaid within 5 years with minimal interest. This should cover the mortgage and most urgent debts, I told them. I can send more once I see how this is being used. My father called me personally to thank me, something so rare it should have been a red flag. You've saved us, Beverly. I always knew that brain of yours would come in handy. 3 months later, I discovered through a Facebook post that my parents had purchased a new Mercedes SUV and were vacationing in Aruba. When I called to ask about this, my mother was defensive. We were under tremendous stress, Beverly. The doctor said your father needed to relax, or he might have another high blood pressure episode. Besides, we put $10,000 toward the mortgage. That counts for something. I was stunned. But what about the creditors? The risk of bankruptcy? We'll get to that. Family helps family without strings attached. I thought your education would have taught you compassion. The conversation ended with me feeling manipulated and used. Still, I tried to rationalize their behavior. People in financial distress often make poor decisions. Perhaps they truly believed a vacation would help them reset and make better choices going forward. I decided to withhold the additional $30,000 I had considered sending until I saw evidence they were addressing their debts responsibly. This decision would prove to be just the first step in a pattern of financial exploitation I was too willing to overlook in the name of family. 6 months after helping my parents, I received an unexpected email from Harold. We hadn't spoken directly in over a year. Hey sis, long time no chat. Hope Stanford is treating you well. I've been meaning to reach out because I've got an amazing business opportunity I'd love to discuss. It's right up your alley with all your economic know-how. Can we schedule a call this week? Against my better judgment, I agreed to the call, curious about what Harold might consider right up my alley. We spoke the following evening, and he was uncharacteristically enthusiastic about my work. I've been following your career, Bev. Really impressive stuff. Those papers you published about investment psychology were fascinating. I was surprised he even knew about my research. Thanks, Harold. That's nice to hear. So here's the thing, he continued, not lingering on the compliment. I've developed a business model for a financial advisory service targeting millennials. It's a mobile app with algorithms that help young people make investment decisions based on their risk tolerance and goals. As he described the concept, I had to admit it sounded promising. Harold had always had a gift for identifying what people wanted, even if his follow-through was lacking. We've got developers ready to go, and I've secured interest from 2 angel investors, but we need seed money to create the prototype and marketing materials. I thought of you immediately because this aligns perfectly with your expertise. How much are you looking for? I asked. 100,000, he said without hesitation. For that, you'd get 15% equity. The projections show break-even in 18 months and potential valuation of $3 million by year 3. The amount was substantial, but the concept was sound if executed properly. Still, I had concerns about Harold's business experience. Can you send me the business plan, financial projections, and information about the development team? I'd also like to speak with these angel investors. Harold seemed prepared for these questions. Absolutely. I'll email everything tonight. And I understand your caution. That analytical mind is exactly why I want you involved. This isn't just about the money, Bev. I want to work with you. We've been disconnected for too long. The documents arrived that night and I spent the weekend reviewing them. The business plan was well structured, the financial projections ambitious but not unreasonable, and the development team appeared to have relevant experience. However, when I reached out to the angel investors Harold had mentioned, one didn't respond, and the other seemed confused about the specifics of the project. I called Harold with my concerns. "Oh, they're just being cautious with an academic," he explained smoothly. "Investors talk differently to different audiences. They've verbally committed, but they're waiting to see the prototype before signing paperwork." Still hesitant, I offered a compromise. "I'll invest $25,000 initially. If the prototype is developed according to the timeline and specifications in your plan, I'll consider the remaining $75,000. Harold agreed enthusiastically. "That's perfect, Bev. You won't regret this. We're going to change the financial industry together." I transferred the money the following day after Harold and I signed a simple investment agreement drafted by a lawyer friend. The funds were specifically designated for prototype development and initial marketing materials. For the first month, Harold sent weekly updates with screenshots of the developing app and reports from the marketing team. I began to feel cautiously optimistic about the venture and our rekindled relationship. Then the updates became less frequent. 2 weeks would pass without communication, then 3. When I emailed for status reports, Harold would respond with vague assurances about development challenges and pivoting the business model. After 3 months of increasingly sparse information, I decided to investigate directly. I contacted the development company listed in the business plan only to discover they had never heard of Harold or the project. The marketing firm similarly had no record of work for Harold's company. Alarm bells now blaring, I hired a private investigator to trace where my investment had gone. What I discovered was devastating. The $25,000 had been transferred directly to Harold's personal account, then quickly dispersed through a series of withdrawals and transfers. Large sums went to online gambling sites, luxury retailers, and restaurants. There was no evidence of any business development whatsoever. I confronted Harold via email, attaching the investigator's report. "I need an explanation. Where is the prototype? Where is my investment?" His response came 3 days later, not via email but a phone call. "Bev, I can explain." He began, his voice trembling slightly. "The original development team fell through and I had to pivot quickly. I've been meeting with potential partners, which explains the restaurant charges. The retail purchases were gifts for potential investors." "And the gambling sites?" I asked coldly. A pause. "I made a mistake there. I was trying to quickly multiply some of the funds to accelerate development when the initial timeline was delayed. I can see how bad this looks, but I swear the project is still viable." "Harold, stop lying. There is no project, is there? This was never real." His voice changed defensive anger, replacing the contrition. "Look, I needed the money, okay? Dad's company is in worse shape than they told you, and I've been helping them stay afloat. I thought I could get this business going, but things got complicated. I was going to pay you back once it took off." "With what?" "There's nothing to take off. You stole from me." "It's not stealing when it's family," he shot back, echoing our mother's words. "You've got plenty of money from your fancy professor job. What's $25,000 to you? Do you know what Dad said when I told him about your investment? He laughed and said, 'At least the Bookworm is finally good for something.'" The words hit like a physical blow. Dad knew about this. Of course he knew. It was his idea to approach you about investing. He said you're so desperate for family approval, you'd jump at the chance to work with me. I ended the call and sat in stunned silence. Not only had Harold defrauded me, but my parents had actively encouraged it. They had calculated my emotional vulnerabilities and exploited them for financial gain. I sent a formal demand letter to Harold requiring repayment of the full amount within 30 days. His response was a text message. "Sorry, sis, can't get blood from a stone. Maybe next time don't be so gullible." I blocked his number and my parents' numbers. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity what my family truly was. Not people who had failed to appreciate me, but people who viewed me as a resource to be exploited. The bookworm, the nerd, the ATM. After consulting with my lawyer, I decided to file a police report for fraud and pursue civil action to recover my money. The family that had never valued my intelligence was about to discover just how formidable it could be when turned against them. 3 weeks after filing the police report, I received a certified letter from a law firm in Boston. My family was suing me. The complaint alleged that the $25,000 I had given Harold was actually a loan to the entire family for their shared business venture, and that I had subsequently demanded repayment with usurious interest and made threatening statements. The lawsuit further claimed that the $50,000 I had given my parents was not a loan, but rather a familial obligation to support them in their retirement, part of an oral agreement in exchange for their years of sacrifice raising and educating me. I laughed out loud reading these claims, a harsh, bitter sound in my empty apartment. The audacity was almost impressive. My parents, who had refused to contribute a penny to my education, were now claiming I owed them financial support because of their sacrifices. The law firm representing them was headed by Frank Wilson, an old friend of my father's. I remembered him from childhood barbecues, a loud, backslapping man who had once told me that pretty girls don't need to worry about calculus. Now he was leading this absurd legal attack. I immediately contacted Kathleen Reeves, a formidable attorney specializing in financial fraud, whom I had met at a university event. After reviewing the complaint, she was confident it would be dismissed. "This is a transparent attempt to intimidate you," she explained. "They're hoping you'll drop the fraud charges and possibly even pay them more money to make this go away." "They don't know me very well then," I replied. Kathleen helped me file a countersuit for fraud, breach of contract, and emotional distress. We also continued pursuing the criminal charges against Harold. The legal process would be lengthy, but I was prepared for the fight. What I wasn't prepared for was the extent of my family's deception. As Kathleen's team investigated, they uncovered a pattern of financial misconduct stretching back years. My parents had accumulated over $300,000 in debt through a combination of risky investments, luxury purchases, and outright scams. More disturbing was the discovery that Harold and my father had attempted similar investment schemes with other relatives, former classmates, and even my father's elderly co-workers. They had created fake business proposals, fabricated investment opportunities, and collected loans they never intended to repay. One email exchange between my father and Harold was particularly revealing. After I had sent the initial $25,000, my father wrote, "Good work, son. The professor is hooked. Give it a month of regular updates, then start hinting about needing the rest of the money. She's always been desperate for our approval. Use that. Once we get the full amount, we'll figure out the next step." Harold's response, "No worries, Dad. Bev's the easiest mark we've had. She actually believes I respect her research, as if anyone reads those boring papers." Reading these exchanges preserved in discovery documents was like having a curtain pulled back on my entire childhood. The dismissive comments, the lack of interest in my achievements, it wasn't just that they valued different things. They fundamentally did not respect me as a person. Another bombshell came when we discovered my parents were facing criminal charges of their own. The real estate investments that had supposedly failed were actually part of a small-scale Ponzi scheme my father had been running. He had collected investment funds for properties that either didn't exist or were significantly misrepresented, using new investments to pay returns to earlier investors. The civil case against me was merely a desperate attempt to secure funds before their other legal troubles came to a head. They needed money quickly, and I was the most convenient target. As the court date approached, I received a series of increasingly desperate messages from my mother. First came guilt. How could you do this to your own family after everything we've done for you? Then came threats. If you continue with this, we'll make sure everyone knows what an ungrateful daughter you are. Finally came tearful pleas. Please, Beverly. We made mistakes, but we're still your parents. Don't let us go to jail. I didn't respond to any of them. The evidence spoke for itself. 2 weeks before our scheduled court date, I received an unexpected email from the dean of the business school at the university where Harold had completed his MBA. The school was planning their graduation ceremony and wanted to know if I would be willing to deliver the keynote address. My recent paper on ethical decision-making in financial institutions had caught their attention, and they thought it would be particularly relevant for their graduates. I checked the date. It was the same day as our court appearance, but in the morning. The court case was scheduled for the afternoon. A strange coincidence, but one that seemed almost fated. I accepted the invitation without mentioning my connection to one of their former graduates. As I prepared my speech about ethics, integrity, and the real-world consequences of financial misconduct, I realized this was an opportunity I couldn't have designed better myself. My family had no idea I would be speaking at this event, which they would certainly attend to maintain appearances. They would be a captive audience to the very values they had disregarded throughout their lives. The morning of the graduation, I arrived early and asked to be kept off the printed program. I wanted the element of surprise. From backstage, I watched as families filed in, locating my parents and Harold in the front row, dressed immaculately and smiling, as if they didn't have a court date for fraud that same afternoon. The dean approached the podium for introductions. For our keynote address, we are honored to welcome one of the most distinguished voices in economic ethics. Her work on decision-making and accountability has influenced policy at the highest levels. Please welcome Stanford University professor Beverly Johnson. As I walked onto the stage, I locked eyes with my family. My mother's smile froze, my father's jaw literally dropped, and Harold went pale. It was a moment of perfect recognition. They finally saw me not as the easily manipulated bookworm, but as someone with power and authority they hadn't anticipated. And in that moment, standing before them, not as a daughter seeking approval, but as Dr. Beverly Johnson, respected scholar and speaker, I felt a lifetime of inadequacy fall away. Good morning, graduates, families, faculty, and friends. I began, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through me. It's an honor to address you on this significant day. I delivered a compelling speech about ethics in business, the responsibilities that come with financial knowledge, and how the choices we make affect not just balance sheets, but human lives. Throughout, I maintained professional composure, never directly acknowledging my family's presence or our personal connection. The true measure of success, I concluded, isn't found in wealth accumulated or status achieved, but in the integrity with which you conduct your affairs. In business as in life, we are defined not by what we claim to be, but by what we demonstrate through our actions. The applause was enthusiastic, and as I stepped away from the podium, I noticed my father attempting to leave discreetly. My mother remained seated, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. Harold stared at his program, refusing to look up. After the ceremony, as guests mingled at the reception, I approached them directly. My mother saw me first, her eyes widening in alarm. "Congratulations on your son's alma mater inviting me to speak," I said pleasantly, as if we were merely acquaintances. What a remarkable coincidence that we'll all be seeing each other again in court this afternoon. Harold finally looked up. "Beverly, please. Can we talk privately?" I nodded, and we stepped away from the crowd into a quiet corridor. "I didn't know you were speaking today," he began awkwardly. "Clearly, your face showed that. Look, about the lawsuit and everything. It wasn't my idea. Dad's desperate. They could lose everything." "They already have," I replied calmly. "The fraud investigation has uncovered all of it, Harold. The fake investments, the Ponzi scheme, the multiple victims. This isn't just about my money anymore. His face paled further. What are you saying? I'm saying that in 3 hours my attorney will present evidence of systematic fraud involving at least 12 victims besides myself. The combined financial damage exceeds $400,000. This carries potential prison time, not just financial penalties. Harold leaned against the wall. Prison, but they're in their 60s. Age doesn't excuse crime, I said. They made their choices repeatedly and deliberately. So did you. What can I do? His voice had lost all its usual confidence. There must be something. I studied my brother, seeing him clearly, perhaps for the first time. Not the golden child or the charismatic con man, but a scared man who had never developed the character or skills to succeed honestly. You can start by admitting everything to the judge. No more lies, no more schemes. Return whatever money you haven't spent and be prepared to make restitution for the rest. And if I do that, will you drop the charges against me? I shook my head. That's not how this works, Harold. There are consequences for actions, but full cooperation and voluntary restitution will look better to the judge than continued deception. As we rejoined the reception, my parents were nowhere to be seen. Harold looked defeated. They left, he said. Dad said to tell you they'll see you in court. 3 hours later, we gathered in the courtroom. My parents had changed from their graduation finery into more subdued attire, perhaps hoping to appear modest and financially strained. My father refused to meet my eyes while my mother kept dabbing at hers with a tissue. Frank Wilson, their attorney, approached Kathleen before the judge entered, proposing a settlement. My clients are willing to drop their lawsuit if Dr. Johnson agrees to withdraw her countersuit and criminal complaints. Family matters should remain private. Kathleen's response was cool and professional. This ceased to be a family matter when it became criminal fraud. We'll let the judge decide. The proceedings began, and Kathleen presented our evidence methodically. Bank records showing the transfer of my investment directly to Harold's personal account. Emails between my father and Harold discussing their strategy to extract more money from me. Documentation of the pattern of similar schemes targeting others. The most damning evidence came when Kathleen called witnesses, 3 other victims of my family's financial manipulations. An elderly former colleague of my father, who had invested his retirement savings in a non-existent property development. A cousin who had loaned Harold money for a fake medical emergency. A neighbor who had contributed to a fraudulent charity my parents claimed to be running. As testimony mounted, I watched my family's facade crumble. My father's confident posture gave way to slumped shoulders. My mother stopped pretending to cry and sat staring blankly ahead. Harold looked physically ill. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was stern. The evidence of systematic fraud is overwhelming. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, your lawsuit against your daughter appears to be not only without merit, but a continuation of a pattern of financial exploitation. It is hereby dismissed. She turned to address the criminal complaints. Based on the evidence presented, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Until then, I am issuing a temporary order requiring the defendants to repay Dr. Johnson the full $75,000 plus legal fees within 30 days. As we rose when the judge exited, my parents finally looked at me directly. There was no anger or defiance left in their expressions, only a dawning recognition of the consequences they faced. Outside the courtroom, Harold approached me one last time. I'm sorry, Beverly. Truly sorry. Not just for the money, but for everything. It was the first genuine thing he'd said to me in years. I hope you mean that, I replied. You'll need genuine remorse when the criminal case proceeds. Will you visit if we go to prison? The question caught me off guard. After everything, he still expected familial obligation. I don't know, Harold. Right now, I need distance. What happens in the future will depend on whether you actually change or just become better at pretending. As I walked away, I felt a strange lightness. The family that had diminished me for decades no longer had that power. Their opinion of me, bookworm nerd easy mark, had been revealed as projection of their own insecurities and moral failings. I had nothing left to prove to them and nothing left to seek from them. For the first time in my life, I was truly free of their judgment. And in that freedom, I found a peace I had never known was possible. The criminal case against my family proceeded swiftly. With overwhelming evidence and multiple victims coming forward, both my parents and Harold accepted plea deals rather than risk trial. My father received a 5-year sentence for fraud and financial exploitation, while my mother and Harold each received 3 years with the possibility of parole after 18 months. The day they were sentenced, I didn't attend court. I had said my goodbyes in that civil courtroom months earlier. Instead, I was in my office at Stanford, meeting with a student who was struggling with balancing academic pressures and family expectations. "My parents don't understand why I'm studying philosophy instead of business," she explained, tears threatening. "They say I'm wasting my potential and their money." I smiled gently. "Your value isn't determined by how others measure success. What looks like wasted potential to them might be the exact path you need to follow." In the aftermath of the court case, I channeled my energy into creating something positive from the experience. I established a scholarship fund for first-generation college students whose families didn't support their academic ambitions. The Beverly Johnson Resilience Scholarship provided not just financial assistance, but mentoring and emotional support for students navigating higher education without family backing. My research shifted slightly as well, incorporating more examination of how family dynamics influence financial decision-making and ethical choices. I began writing a book combining personal narrative with academic research, exploring how we develop financial values and the complex relationship between money, family, and self-worth. The book became an unexpected bestseller, resonating with readers who had experienced family financial manipulation or struggled with setting boundaries around money. I received hundreds of emails from people sharing similar stories, thanking me for giving voice to experiences they had thought were unique to them. The publicity brought interview requests and speaking engagements. On a book tour stop in New York, I appeared on a morning talk show where the host asked about reconciliation. "After everything that happened, would you ever consider rebuilding a relationship with your family?" It was a question I had asked myself many times. Reconciliation requires acknowledgement, remorse, and changed behavior. I answered carefully. I remain open to the possibility that people can change, but I also believe in protecting my own well-being. Real forgiveness doesn't mean pretending harm never happened. It means creating new boundaries based on current reality, not past hopes. 6 months into my parents' sentences, I received a letter from my mother. Unlike her previous communications, this one contained no manipulation, no guilt-tripping, no demands. Instead, it was a simple acknowledgement of wrongdoing and an expression of regret. "I failed you as a mother," she wrote. "Not just in recent years with the financial deceptions, but throughout your childhood when I failed to see and celebrate your gifts. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I recognize the harm I caused." I didn't respond immediately, taking time to process whether this represented genuine change or was another manipulation. Eventually, I sent a brief note acknowledging her letter and wishing her well in her rehabilitation programs. My healing came not from family reconciliation, but from building a life rich with meaningful connections. My friendship with Linda remained a cornerstone of emotional support. My mentor relationship with Professor Miller evolved into a collaborative research partnership. And most unexpectedly, I found romance with James, a fellow professor in the philosophy department who approached relationships with the same thoughtful intentionality he brought to his academic work. 2 years after the court case, I received an email from Harold, who had been released on parole after serving 18 months. "I don't know if you'll read this," he began, "but I need to say it anyway. The person I was before prison, the entitled, manipulative person who saw others as means to an end, that wasn't who I wanted to be. It was who I was taught to be. In here, I've had to confront who I really am without the facade. I'm not asking for money or help or even forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that the work you're doing with your scholarship fund matters. People like me needed someone like you when we were younger showing a different way to be. I read the email several times searching for hidden angles or manipulations, but finding none. I replied with a simple acknowledgement and a recommendation for legitimate resources for formerly incarcerated individuals seeking to rebuild their lives. Whether this represented genuine change or another performance remained to be seen. Time would tell. But I no longer needed their redemption for my own happiness. In my campus office, I keep no family photos on my desk. Instead, there's a framed quote from Toni Morrison: "The function of freedom is to free someone else." Below it sits a small display of thank you cards from scholarship recipients and students I've mentored over the years. The family that once dismissed me as a useless bookworm ultimately gave me my greatest lesson that true family isn't defined by DNA, but by mutual respect, support, and love. The people who celebrate your successes rather than diminish them. The ones who value you not for what you can provide, but for who you are. I found my real family not in the house where I grew up, but in the life I built afterward. And in that realization came a peace more profound than any vindication or victory in court could provide. Life isn't about proving your worth to those who refuse to see it. It's about recognizing your own value and surrounding yourself with people who see it too. Sometimes the family we're born into teaches us what love isn't, so we can better recognize what love truly is when we find it elsewhere. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who couldn't support your dreams, or found your chosen family when blood relatives let you down? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else feeling alone in similar circumstances. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others find this community of understanding. Remember, your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it, and sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from those who diminish you even when they share your name.